As you've seen in the previous lesson, building custom applications from scratch requires a lot of time, knowledge, and effort. Without a well-designed structure, the code of these applications tend to become quite difficult to maintain and hard to upgrade over time, often resulting in costly refactoring periods. That being said, the most common way to craft common programs these days is therefore to use a framework. In short, a framework is a tool that helps developers build reliable applications much faster by providing a customizable blueprint that bundles together the most frequently used functionalities for crafting specific type of software, such as web servers for instance, so that they don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time they start a new project. By removing the structural overhead, it allows developers to conduct their tasks more efficiently by solely focusing on project-specific features, which will in turn improve the cleanliness, the adaptability, and the testability of the code, while removing the risk of introducing errors and code duplication. So in this lesson, we're going to re-implement the get and post route from the previous project using this time the Express framework, which is a minimalist web framework that aims to reduce the boilerplate for creating web applications and APIs in Node.js. So let's start by creating a new directory named Express Server, and within it a new file named app.js that will contain the code of our Express application. Once we've done that, let's enter this new directory and install the Express package using the npm install command. Let's now import the Express package within the app file and initialize a new Express application by invoking the top-level Express function exported by the module, which is in a way the equivalent of the createServer method of Node's built-in HTTP module we've used in the previous lesson. To bind the application to a specific port, we can use the listen method of the server instance that takes as argument a port number and a callback function that we can use to log the server startup, for example. Now, before we implement the first get-hello route, let's have a quick look at how Express handles routing. In the previous lesson's example, the application's route were contained within the request listener callback function, and each incoming request had to manually be routed using repetitive if-else statements. In Express, rather than being part of the server's request listener function body, routes are individually attached to the server object using the following syntax. Here, app is an Express instance created using the Express function. Method is a method that represents an HTTP verb such as get for handling get requests or post for handling post requests. Path is a string of characters representing an URN, which can be a string pattern or a regular expression. And handler is a request listener function, also called a controller, similar to the one we've used in the previous lesson that takes as argument a request and a response object, and that is executed every time the route is matched. So with that in mind, to re-implement the same get-hello route from the previous example, all we have to do is use the get method of the server instance to create the route, declare the /hello string as first argument, declare the request listener as second argument, and use the send method of the response object to send the hello world string back to the client, which will by default set the content type header of the response to plain text and its status code to 200 without any further actions required on our side. Now that we're all set, let's start the application in a new terminal window using the node app command, and let's open a second terminal window and run the following curl command into it to send a get request to the hello endpoint we just created. As you can see here, the server successfully responds with an HTTP 200 OK containing the hello world string. Now, if you remember, in the previous lesson, to extract the email and password fields from the request payload, we had to manually verify the content type header, set up two different handlers to process the chunks of data composing the message body, and parse the recomposed message body using the JSON parse function. Now in Express, things are a lot more simpler, as all of these actions can be performed at once using a special type of function called a middleware, whose role is going to be to intercept an incoming request, do some processing, and forward it to the controller. So to process JSON encoded payloads, we can use the JSON function exported by Express by declaring it right before the request handler in the route method. Technically speaking, this middleware would add a new body property to the request object containing the parsed JSON data, which can then be exploded using the destructuring assignment syntax as follows. From here, we're simply going to duplicate the logic we've implemented in the previous lesson, but we're going to do it the Express way. In Express, to send a response back to the client in the JSON format, we can directly use the JSON method of the response object, which will automatically do three things for us. It will set the content type header to application JSON, it will set the status code to 200, and it will serialize the data object. Now, if you remember, when an error occurred due to a non-matching email password pair, we were manually setting the status code of the response to 401 by assigning a value to the status code property of the response object. In Express, to achieve the same thing, we can use the chainable status method of the response object as follows. Once we've done that, we can now kill the server using Ctrl+C and restart it with the node app command. To verify that the post route is working, we're first going to send a request containing an email password pair that matches the hard-coded values defined within the code, which as you can see causes the server to successfully respond with an HTTP 200 OK containing an access token. And second, we're going to send a request containing an invalid email password pair, which as expected causes the application to respond with an HTTP 401 unauthorized containing an error message. And this concludes this introduction on how to create a simple web API in Node.js using the Express framework. As you now have the minimum amount of required knowledge to build web APIs, in the following lessons we'll be setting up and configuring a new repository, and finally we're going to start building the authentication microservice itself.